The Mets winning streak has been snapped at 7 games. I will discuss that on today's show, as well as Pete Alonso's future and why the Mets need him just as much as he needs the Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Resolve your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals by calling 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. Well, we knew it had to end at some point. The New York Mets winning streak was snapped at 7 games as the Texas Rangers beat them in the final game of this series to avoid getting swept. The Mets now have an off day on Thursday before trying to pick things back up in Chicago against the Cubs over the weekend. And this was a game where Sean Manaea was once again sort of baffling to try to describe because he carries a no-hitter into the 6th inning. And it was one of those no-hitters where you didn't notice until S&Y sort of honed in on the hits on the scoreboard. I love when they do that during a game. I feel like they choose the moments where it's not obvious to tell you, hey, guess what? There's a no-hitter going on. But you would not have realized it because the first inning was such a disaster, and yet he was Houdini. Sean Manaea is so confusing to me because there's times where he looks unbelievable. There's times where he can't find the strike zone. He's just a marvel. And so in that first inning, he gets the first 2 outs. Then he walks 3 in a row to load the bases. And then he's up 0-2 on Wyatt Langford, and he hits him in the foot. So all of a sudden, a run comes in that he completely forced in himself. Then he gets a ground out to get out of the inning. And from that point on, though, he was great. He gets you all the way through the 5th inning without giving up a hit. So, again, just a really strange start from Manaea. He threw 36 pitches in that first inning, and then he settled in. So, a weird one. The Mets end up tying up the game relatively quickly. In the 4th inning, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, they each double to tie it up. So, you're sitting there with a 1-1 game for a little bit. Then in the 6th inning, the Mets grab a lead, and you think, all right, here's win number 8. Pete Alonso crushed a 2-run homer. This is when you know Pete's on. There's a couple of telltale signs, right? There's when he is, finding holes in the infield, hitting those hard ground balls and, hitting RBI doubles and getting base hits with runners in scoring position. That's when you know Pete's really starting to feel it. And then when he starts to hit pitches up in the zone and drive him out of the ballpark, that's another telltale sign because Pete, he can get a pitch in the zone, belt high below that, and he can just, even when he's not on, run into some home runs. But when he's not going right, he's chasing outside of the zone, and he's missing when there's pitches up in the zone. This one was at the top of the zone, but it was down the middle, and Pete Alonso destroyed it. And I really did think the winning streak was going to continue because at that point, Manaea was rolling. You thought he'd get you through 6, and then you just need 9 outs from the bullpen. But Manaea eventually faltered there in the 6th inning. He got the first guy out, so that was 14 straight batters he retired. Then he gave up a base hit, so there went the no-hitter. Gets a fly out, so he's 1 out away. But he gives up a double that scores a run, and at that point, Carlos Mendoza had seen enough. He goes to the bullpen. Sean Reed-Foley comes in. He did not have his best stuff today. He gave up a base hit that tied the game. Then he walked a batter, finally got a strikeout. There was a lot of conversation during Sean Reed-Foley's relief appearance where you saw Jeremy Hefner and a trainer going back and forth. So I don't know what's going on there. Didn't seem like he had the same zip on his fastball, and he was staying away from it a little bit. So that's just something to monitor. I would not be shocked at all if we end up finding out that there is something wrong there and he needs a short stint on the IL, but we'll just wait and see on that one. For now, he still did his job for the most part to keep the Mets tied, but they just could not score for the rest of the game. And the 7th inning, Drew Smith, a Texas native who had such a great moment in game 1 of this series, well, he didn't get out of town without a rough one. He ends up blowing the game for the Mets, taking the loss, got the first 2 outs of the inning, but then walks Corey Seager. But then in a 7-pitch battle against Leody Taveras, he gives up a 2-run homer, and that proves to be the difference in the game. One thing that I wanted to mention about Drew Smith, and it doesn't come up in this one, he got a clean inning, but prior to tonight, he had a 2.40 ERA, and this is a moment where I'm probably combating with people on Twitter or X that might not even be listening to the show. But when there was the point where Edwin Diaz was going to come back and someone was going to have to get taken out of this bullpen, I fired off a tweet about why I believe Daniel Nunez and Danny Young had earned their spot to remain in this bullpen. And the Mets would have to choose between somebody from the group of Adam Ottavino, who most deserved to be off the roster based on his performance, but just we didn't expect that because of his veteran stature and his contract. And then there was Sean Reed-Foley or Drew Smith. And I honestly can't remember which one I would have picked and which one I said on the show. So I can't just sit here and say, oh, I definitely meant Drew Smith. But here's what I will say. The thing about Drew Smith, and the reason why I am now talking about this again as a full circle moment, I had a lot of people on social that really came at me with that tweet because at the time, Drew Smith's ERA was minuscule. I'm not sure exactly what it was when I sent off the tweet, but before he came in today, he had a 2.40 ERA. Here's what I want to tell you about Drew Smith that doesn't really show up in the numbers. For one, he has a 1.56 whip. So even though the ERA is great, what does a 1.56 whip mean? That's walks and hits over innings pitch. So when he's going out there, he's typically allowing at least one base runner and most of the times, even 2 base runners when he pitches in an inning. That is playing with fire. Also, there is inherited runners that can come in to score. Now, nobody keeps this statistic, and if anybody knows where you can find it, please let me know, because the only place that I commonly find inherited runners to score is CBS Sports, and I don't trust CBS Sports with anything. So because I don't, I looked at their stats, and I saw they had Drew Smith at 15 inherited runners that have scored this year against him. And I thought that is way too much. So I actually went through and took the time, by taking like 20 minutes. I went through every single game that Drew Smith has pitched this year to count up the inherited runners that he's allowed to score. How many do you think that is? 8. 8 inherited runners that he is allowed to score. Now, you can't just say, oh, add that to his ERA. That would be faulty logic to say those are all on him. But let's just say, for example, that half of those are on him, that you want him to at least strand half of them. And that's not even counting the ones that he did strand. So again, a little bit of faulty logic, but I just want to show you how much the ERA could explode or could be so much worse based on the runs that have scored when he's on the mound. If you just take the runs he has allowed, 6 earned runs, and then look at the 8 inherited runs that came in and you say, all right, let's attribute 4 of them to Drew Smith. His ERA would be 5.63. So ERA can be deceiving. WHIP, all of the other advanced metrics you'll find, expected ERA, expected FIP, all these different things tell me that Danny Young is a better pitcher than Drew Smith. I believe that for sure. Drew Smith's going to be a free agent after this year. He's been a pretty nice find for the Mets in the Lucas Duda trade all the way back. He has been a nice bullpen arm for them, but do I trust him in leverage situations? Absolutely not. Now, I digress. There's not much else negative I want to say. Look, this team lost a game. It was going to happen. They're still only a game back in the wild card race. They're 3 games under 500. We want them to get to that mark, and if they can get there by the end of this month and they're 500 going into July, I feel great about the Mets' chances to be a contender this year, and I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon because of a single loss. It was due to happen. Let's see what they do this weekend in Chicago. For the rest of the show today, I want to actually look at a big picture topic, one that I've had on my mind for a while. Why Pete Alonso and the New York Mets need each other. So I'll get to that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here with Locked On Mets, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. We give it to you year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also just see the link in the episode description below. Today's episode is also brought to you by Policygenius. You never know what can happen in life. This is why it's always best to be prepared to make sure your family is taken care of. This is why everyone should have life insurance, but sometimes finding the right policy, it's not easy. It can be really time consuming, even overwhelming. I got married a year ago. I wanted to make sure I had life insurance, so if anything happened, my wife would be taken care of. And Policygenius was a huge benefit to me. I don't have, I'm a freelancer, so I don't have an employer that I could go through for my life insurance. Policygenius made it so easy. They're the country's leading online insurance marketplace that will save you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage, and some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius will help you compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. You can find the lowest price, and their team of licensed experts is there. They're on hand to help talk you through the whole thing. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time. With Policygenius, head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the episode description to get your free insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. The Stanley Cup Finals is coming down to the wire. If you want to be up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. The beauty of not recording live, I just changed up the order because I think it's going to flow a little better for you guys as you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, you see on the side our list of topics, and I have why Pete Alonso needs the Mets first. I want to table that. I want to talk instead about why the Mets need Pete Alonso, and then we're going to transition to Alonso's market. So, okay, what does free agency look like for the Mets this offseason? Let's fast forward into the future. And obviously, the context of what this season becomes certainly changes things. If the New York Mets go on a miraculous run and win a World Series, everyone's getting paid, everyone's getting money. Pete Alonso, lifetime contract, but we can't count on that, right? Are the Mets even going to make the playoffs? We still don't know. Let's play out the scenario that Pete Alonso does not get traded. Okay, so he stays with the team all the way through. They decide to hold on to him, and they extend him the qualifying offer. He's a free agent. What are the options if you choose to not sign Pete Alonso? Who else is out there? You got Juan Soto. That's the big one. And when the Mets play the Yankees coming up, I actually have a little fun Pete Alonso, Juan Soto trading places in the offseason podcast that we will get to because I think there is something to be said about Steve Cohen just spending a ridiculous money on Juan Soto that is beyond what the Yankees want, and who knows what they would pivot to. But let's just take that off the table as well. Let's say Juan Soto is going to sign with the Yankees, because you can't count right now at the trade deadline, even if you're trying to make this decision about your future, on being able to sign Juan Soto. This is why I think you still hold Pete through this year, because you still want the ability to bring him back. To me, that is more valuable than what the return might be from the prospect side of things. So you look at, okay, this situation, everything's played out, free agency, Soto signs with the Yankees. Okay, so now who are your options? Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Willy Adames. That's the top of the market. Willy Adames for the shortstop, not really the offensive piece that I think the Nets would be looking for to replace Alonso's production by sliding him to third. Just don't see that one. He's having a great year, but that's not happening. Alex Bregman. Okay, you can make a case that he could be your third baseman. Mark Vientos could be your first baseman. If I'm going to pay Bregman, why not pay Alonso is the way I look at it, because Bregman has been on a decline. He was an 8-win player once, but a long time ago. Still good, but a guy that has taken advantage of those Crawford boxes for a long time. I don't know how Bregman's going to age. I'd rather watch my guy age than Alex Bregman is where I'd be at with that. You got Cody Bellinger if he opts out. I don't think he will opt out, and the Mets weren't interested this offseason. Alex Verdugo, Michael Conforto, Mark Canha, Tyler O'Neill, Teoscar Hernandez, Harrison Bader. Not a lot of names jump out. In the first base market, particularly Paul Goldschmidt and Christian Walker. I believe Walker is going to stay with the Diamondbacks. That's just my sense. I would think that they might extend him. We'll see. Just feels like a guy that they'd want to keep and who'd want to stay. Goldschmidt, he's on a decline. You don't want to see Paul Goldschmidt come in. And then there is JD Martinez, Eloy Jimenez, potential DH guys. And I talked about on a show last weekend, JD Martinez versus Pete Alonso. Who would you rather see on the Mets payroll in 2025? So if you're interested in that layer of this conversation, go back and watch or listen to that show. My overarching point with this is I don't see a free agent fit that can replace Pete Alonso's production unless you sign Juan Soto, who would be in the outfield, but it's more about the offensive production, the middle of your lineup. I don't see the bat that jumps out to me. So, all right, let him walk because you don't want to pay him. How are you going to fill that need internally? Mark Vientos, that's the clear cut. He could be the guy. He could be your first baseman of the future. Probably an easier lift for him defensively. He's been solid at third base, but he'd be potentially a plus defender at first. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. You have the guy. It's the guy that we've been talking about. I did comparisons of Mark Vientos to Pete Alonso in 2021 and 2022 when he was going through the minor leagues. It fits. Well, what's the answer at third base? Do you believe in Brett Beatty? Do you believe in Ronnie Mauricio? And let's say you do have faith in both of those guys. What would a potential lineup look like if the Mets just stay internal? Would you be happy if the 2025 Mets roll out a lineup that was Francisco Lindor, batting leadoff, playing short, Nimmo and left, batting second, and then I struggle to find a third hitter? Francisco Alvarez, catcher, Mark Vientos batting cleanup, Starling Marte and right, Brett Beatty, your starting everyday third baseman, batting sixth, Drew Gilbert. We still haven't seen him play this year. Is he going to be ready by opening day to be your starting center fielder? Ronnie Mauricio is your DH, and then you have Luis Angel Acuna / Jeff McNeil at second. And yes, Jet Williams could be on the way, but it's pretty much a lost season for him. They've almost all but said he's done. There was a good article by Tim Healy with coach from Jet Williams, and his plan right now is just get ready for the Arizona Fall League. So lost year for your top prospect. Maybe we see him in 2025. I think he probably will, but is he going to be a slugger that's going to hit you 40 home runs? That's not his profile. You do have Ryan Clifford to dream on. He's in AA, putting up some good numbers, but he's still a prospect. So you're counting on all these prospects. And I almost feel like with prospects, it's maybe 1 in every 4 that are really going to hit, and to hit the way Alonso has. Well, look at the recent track record in Mets franchise history of getting a player who has produced at the offensive levels of Pete Alonso. It's pretty much never happened outside of David Wright and Darryl Strawberry when you talk about a homegrown guy putting up ridiculous offensive numbers. So when I lay that whole case out for you, why would the Mets not be interested in keeping Pete Alonso? What it would come down to is the contract, and that's what's going to lead us into our final segment here. Why will Pete Alonso need the Mets? And in turn, why do these two sides need each other? I'm going to talk about the contract that gets Alonso to sign, in my opinion, and why it makes sense for both sides based on the market that will be present for the Mets to replace him and for Alonso to get his bag in the open market. We'll talk about it all in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It is the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You just give your stylist your size, your style, your budget preferences, and then they'll send you a box, and it's no subscription required. They send you 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I got this polo from Stitch Fix. It came in my box. I loved it. There was another one that was in the box as well that I also enjoyed, so I kept those items. I also kept a pair of shorts, a pair of pants I liked. There was a sweater that just was not my style, and so for that, I put it in the mail, sent it back. They didn't charge me. I only had to pay for the items that I love. Stitch Fix makes it all easy. So I don't like to shop and go out into the store and get in the dress rooms and everything. This just makes the process so much simpler. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. Stitchfix.com/MLB must redeem within 7 days of sign up. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime something breaks on the Mets. It's where you can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. And today I'm going to be sharing this following little graphic. I don't know if you call it a graphic, a table right with the insiders. They will get it on their phone. They can look at it and look it over. It is a proposed contract for Pete Alonso. So if you're going to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to be able to see this now. Basically, this is the way I would structure a contract for Pete Alonso. And I have to give a huge shout out to my friend Christopher Soto. You can find him on Twitter at SotoC803. He is an accountant who, as he puts in his Twitter bio, a solidly decent MLB CBA decipherer. And when I have a Mets math question, I hit him up and he was kind enough to put this together for me. What I basically told him as the parameters I was looking for. I was looking for a contract that started with $200 million for Pete Alonso, but one that with deferred money would bring down the average annual value a lot closer to what Brandon Nimmo was getting paid. So those were the parameters. Here's what he came up with for me. So 7 years, $200 million. That's the deal. That's the big flashy number. That's what Scott Boras can sell. This is Pete Alonso's contract. And I don't think there's any team out there that's going to give him a $200 million deal but the New York Mets. But it's also how the New York Mets will structure this deal. So if you look at this table here, what you're going to see on the left, you got contract value, $200 million, 7 years. The average annual value on that contract would be $28.5 million per season, a little bit more than that. But there's going to be $84 million deferred in this contract. So Pete Alonso, really for the 7 years of this deal, is going to be making $16.57 million in change. Now, starting in 2040, all the way through 2046, he's going to get the deferred money, which is $12 million per season. So down the line, Steve Cohen's got to pay a lot of deferred money. But what do you love about deferred money? In 2040, that money does not impact you in luxury tax. All it does is bring down the present day value of the contract. This is the Shohei Ohtani deal, essentially. Okay, so Shohei Ohtani signed his huge contract with all the deferred money because it brought the present day value on a contract down that would have paid him whatever it was, $70 million a year, and brought it down to the more manageable $40 million. I don't remember the exact number, but it made it feasible for the Dodgers to build around him. Now, for this contract, $84 million deferred, essentially what that does by how Christopher, deferred this money based on the taxes and everything else, how the discount rate is factored in, it almost cuts that deferred money in half for what the value is. So instead of an average annual value, $20.5 million, Pete Alonso's average annual value would be around $22.6 million per year. What does that mean? Well, it means the Mets would be able to go out and sign a Corbin Burnes at the same time, make other moves. If they were crazy enough to sign Soto too, sure, but I don't see a world where both of those things happen. Because with Juan Soto, and we'll talk about this more in the show next week, he's going to want a deal that might be double the length, a 13-year deal, 14-year deal. He's young enough to ask for it. And so you want to keep your options open, and that's a lot to be tied up in two players. But the point being, this would give you financial flexibility with Pete Alonso being able to stay on the roster. So if that's the contract, right? 7 years, $200 million, but $84 million deferred. So each year, the luxury tax hit is going to be on the $22.6 million. But what Steve Cohen's actually paying is $16 million and change. All of a sudden, you have a contract that is very feasible for the Mets to hold on their books for 7 seasons. Brandon Nimmo making $162 million over an 8-year deal. He's getting $20.25 million per season when it comes to average annual value. His was a straight contract. There was no deferrals. It wasn't anything like that. It was just $22.5 million every single season. So you'd have Alonso at 22.6 with average annual value, just a little bit more than Nimmo. I think this is fair value for both sides. I really do. Do you want to pay Pete Alonso for all these years is the other part of this. And also, let's actually first touch on why Pete Alonso would want this. So for Pete Alonso's point of view, like I said, this is the only way I think he's getting $200 million, and you get to stay with the Mets, and you don't have to worry about signing a 3-year, $100 million deal or something like that where it's crazy AAV, but you got to perform again and hit the market again. You constantly have the pressure of playing for your next contract. You're not where JD Martinez is at right now, just soldiering on, trying to get 1-year deals. No, this is a contract that would take you through the rest of your prime, your age 30 through age 36 season. You are a New York Met. Why would the Mets want this? Well, it's going to be hard to replace Pete Alonso. As much as you want to say, oh, yeah, Mark Vientos, I just read off that lineup to you of the internal Mets if they don't make any moves. And again, there's not a lot of options in free agency. Even if we say, all right, the Mets signed Christian Walker, who would be a nice replacement for Pete Alonso. You still go through that lineup. Lindor, Nimmo, Alvarez, Christian Walker, Mark Vientos, it still lacks that pop. I think your lineup is still taking a step back. And then there's everything that Pete Alonso has to play for and why he is so much more valuable to the New York Mets than to any other team. Pete Alonso has 208 career home runs after home running tonight. That is 4th all-time for the Mets. 13 behind Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is behind himself. 13 behind Mike Piazza. I was looking at this today. Mike Piazza played parts of 8 seasons with the Mets. Pete Alonso has played parts of 6 seasons now, with one of them being a COVID-shortened season. And Piazza did get traded, but he got traded early in that year, still played over 100 games his first season with the Mets. Across his 8-year tenure with the club, Mike Piazza played 972 games. Pete Alonso has almost caught him in home runs in 200 less games, 756 games. His home run rate is as prolific as anyone ever in a Mets uniform. David Wright's at 242, Darryl Strawberry 252. One more season, Pete Alonso should be the all-time Mets home run leader. You look at RBIs. Right now, he is 6th, just past Edgardo Alfonso with that home run today. 6th on the all-time list. 7th. He could be 6th if he passes Beltran. It's close enough that he probably will. Most likely won't get into the top 5 this year. But if Pete Alonso has 100 RBIs in the next 2 years after this, as well as potentially this season, he will well clear everybody on the list not named David Wright. So by the end of 2026, Pete Alonso should be 2nd all-time in RBIs for the Mets. And he could easily be the first Met ever to 1,000 career RBIs. And if he signed this deal, he would eventually be the all-time record holder in home runs and RBIs. Now, Pete Alonso is also at 208 career home runs. And I think he probably gets to at least 230 this year. So then I was like, all right, 500 home run club. Is it possible? 270 home runs, if that's what he needs to cover on a 7-year deal, would be an average of about 38 and a half per season. So between 30 and 39. This guy has been pretty much averaging 40 home runs a year. Is he going to do that for the full length of a 7-year deal? You could say definitely not. At the same time, JD Martinez is still raking. And you could say, oh, Martinez had a better prime, was a better hitter than Pete Alonso. If you really look at the stats, and I did that in that show last week, not much different. I think Pete Alonso can mature as a hitter and continue to be productive. I think he still probably has, if you need him to, a solid 3 to 4 years where he can be a passable first baseman defensively before you might have to move him to DH. And you might just want to move him to DH if everything else works out for your team and you have a third baseman not named Vientos, and maybe you want to split time between Mark and Pete at first. But to just dismiss Pete Alonso and say, well, he's the guy that can't move, he's not worth the money, I just think you're being a little short-sighted, realizing or there's always this kind of hesitation to see a player get paid. I never get it from a fan perspective. The way I look at it, if you're going to have to pay somebody and you look at the market and you can make a clear case that outside of Juan Soto, Pete Alonso will be the second best bat in this free agent class unless you love Alex Bregman. So if that's really what we're talking about here, then signing him to a contract that makes sense for him, big flashy number, but can be team friendly with the deferrals. I don't see why the Mets wouldn't get this done. And I really feel like that's the conclusion that we're ultimately going to end up with. This season's going to play out. And I think it'll help if the Mets are in contention and aren't selling as fire sellers at the deadline, where it's just sell everything you can. It's not nailed down. If they stay in this race and they are either buyers or stand patters and they keep Alonso through the year, I think they're going to let it play out. And yes, they will pursue Juan Soto first. And that whole situation might play out while keeping tabs with Pete Alonso. Can you do that? Is it easy? Well, I don't know. It would help if they were represented by the same guy. Oh, wait, they are. So I can see everything playing out where the Soto negotiations happen. He ends up on another team. Now he's shopping Pete. And the market ends up falling into the Mets' lap where it's, hey, let's give you that big flashy number. Let's make it make sense for us as a team so that we can continue to build. And then Pete Alonso gets to play carefree on the contract side of things for the rest of his career in a Mets uniform. And I think at some point, he might be part of a World Series team. And wouldn't that be awesome? Because all of a sudden, you're talking about number 20 being retired. You're talking about a Mets Hall of Famer for sure, which he might just be alone with what he's done already in the Mets uniform. And you never know what can happen, what this guy can do to add to his legacy if he could get to 500 home runs in a Mets uniform. It's not outside the realm of possibility at all. So here I am. I'm putting myself out there. That's what I want to see happen. Pete Alonso to re-sign with the New York Mets, and that's how I think it can get done. And that's also why I believe both of these sides need each other. I'll also be writing a follow-up article about this, where I will include as well the Excel sheet. That's what those are called. That shows you that I didn't put it together with all the numbers, and people can look at it because I think it's a interesting structure that gets a deal done. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, I think we're going to stay away from a Friday Farm Report. Might save that for the weekend. I've been really wanting to talk about all-star cases. So which Met right now stands the best chance to make the all-star team? I'll talk about that, and I'll preview the Mets versus Cubs series. If you don't want to miss out on that show, make sure if you're listening, you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. We're getting closer and closer. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. So hit that button. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen or your second watch, head over to YouTube. Check out Locked On Sports Today to stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports. Locked On Sports Today is streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.